The purpose of this video is to look at target date funds as a method of asset allocation, because they are a fine method of asset allocation, and then look at some weaknesses with them and how we can adapt and blend them around other factors in retirement planning to make a much more robust retirement plan and really leverage things a lot more. To do this, first of all, we have to understand what the target date fund is, and then we have to look at some sort of assumptions about people making regarding dividend income, pension income, social security income, and all these different external incomes, and kind of blend it together. So quickly on target date funds. Here the idea is, at the most basic level, that we have an allocation of, say, stocks and bonds. Now, they do break it down to more specific. There's US and international stocks, as do we when we invest them, but still, the highest level, you could say this is stocks and these are bonds, these three. And when you're young, they say you should have lots of stocks and very little bonds. And when you're old, they say you should have lots of bonds and very little stocks. Theory is here, when you're young, with these accounts, that you're not going to use them. I mean, these are specifically designed originally for, in retirement 401ks and stuff like that, and you're targeting age of retirement many years from now. So they make sense. You can actually invest them outside of these accounts and in regular taxables. And it's not a terrible idea to do that, but it could be better if you split these into individual accounts and funds rather, because then you can get advantages of tax loss harvesting when you rebalance. The counter argument to that is rebalancing is a pain in the backside. So if you do this, it's got a built-in rebalancer, and you're letting Vanguard do the rebalancing. And this matters rebalancing when, obviously the stock market goes down, and maybe the bonds didn't go down as much, or they're kind of levelish, and you sell some bonds and buy some stocks. And by doing that, it's supposed to, in theory, but it also depends on how the sequence of risk goes and sequence of returns goes, which we'll get into in a bit too. It's supposed to, in theory, enhance returns overall by rebalancing at the right time, because it keeps you on track. So when the market comes back up again, which hopefully that's what does happen, then you'll be in a stronger position than if you hadn't rebalanced. Okay, so that's the idea. They start high and they go low. It's called a glide path. They use this term because it's like an airplane landing. You're starting here with all the stocks, the blue and the purple of stocks, and you go down, 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 and down. You land the plane here, and then you keep it pretty stable through the later years of retirement. This is great, and I do like them, and especially they're low cost, they self-rebalance, and you set it and forget it. Dividend reinvestment, I do like it. But there is a weakness that we can exploit, and we'll use this, I guess, to improve other ththings. So it mentions a couple of pieces to it. So one of them is also understanding income versus expenses, because it's a big piece of retirement. People forget that you don't need income. People forget that because they've been conditioned all their life that you have to earn money from a job to pay your bills. And yes, in retirement you will have bills. But what people also seem to forget is you can pay bills with assets, right? With savings, with social security and everything else. So some things you can't prevent, some income you can't prevent. If you have $1 million taxable account, you simply can't prevent a certain amount of income coming to your tax return from that annually, unless you use 100% municipal bonds, which then comes with a risk of concentration. So you don't want to do that either. So what we're looking at here is there's two different sort of people, but there's never going to be two people who are exactly the same. There's not going to be one person on the far left of the spectrum who's 103,000 of income, is all of his money is somehow turned into income. This person would probably have to take all of his wealth and buy an annuity, because it doesn't really exist. Even if he had interest income or something else, he would have to have an asset that produced the income. And then on the other extreme of the sort of side of the spectrum here, you've got someone who says, I don't want any income at all. I'm seeking assets, not income. And to do that, again, it's not going to be possible because he's going to have some sort of income generated. However, and also when I say income, taxable income, because if you put income into a retirement wrapper, into a 401k or something, then it changes the taxation. First of all, it could, in a Roth, make it tax-free income, and then also in a 401k traditional sort of plan, pre-tax, people who have dividend interest, you've got to think about this, it has preferred treatment on dividends, but if you're taking out money from the 401k, it doesn't care who sourced that income. There's no special record keeping inside the account. If you had $1 million 401k and you had 100 years of qualified dividends, take that out, that's ordinary income. So you lose the benefit that you would have from qualified dividends and from capital gains, right? You're converting to income. So something to be thoughtful there. Now, despite that, what we're looking at, what we're trying to do here is say that we can compare conceptually maybe never perfectly, but conceptually compare income and a comparable amount of cash. So we can say hypothetically that someone who would like $1,000 of dividend income, it should be a fair deal to maybe give them $40,000 in cash. Maybe that's worth it, you know. And then likewise, you know, maybe a pension is of $90,000 for the rest of their lives is worth 1.5 million. That's a decision we have to make a lot of times when we're looking at pensions. Do we take the lump sum or do we annuitize and take the pension? You know, there are ways to figure that out. And there's ways to say, oh, well, this is much better return than the market because I can't get, you know, 6% return right now guaranteed. I can't get 8% guaranteed, and the pension's the better deal, and vice versa. But that's kind of a separate thing. We do that analysis, but separately. All we're doing here is we're trying to look at this idea of saying there's equilibrium. There's a price somewhere that we think is reasonable to say, you know, this equals this, whatever it might be. And in this case, I've said 103 equals 1.693 million. And that's because I've discounted this a little bit by risk. I'm saying like, okay, you know, maybe it's better or more. It can go up and down because of the risk of the asset too. So I'm saying 1.693 million. So bear with me in assuming that's a fair price, because under your methods and everything else, that could be 2 million, that could be 200,000 for the same deal, but it doesn't matter. We're just going for this idea that there is equilibrium at some point. So if there was equilibrium, what would be better based on other factors? And this is what I'm trying to get to. And this is the key. There's income and there's expenses. Now, in retirement, if your expenses were 103,000 a year and your income was 103,000 a year, then I think what we'd have, I'm just going to make that a loss actually, I think we'd have a situation where it would be preferable to use assets. Okay. Now that's assuming that your assets can survive you in retirement, obviously. You know, if that 1.693 doesn't last retirement, then that's a whole different topic. So keep that in mind. But what I'm trying to say is here, it is superior from the lens of taxes. Okay. Now, from the lens of longevity survival, if that was all you had for assets, then most people would say, hey, I would like that pension because I'll very quickly, you know, run a risk of running out of money. Okay. Now, the reason why that looks like a pension decision here, looks like a, you know, sort of taking the 90,000 pension versus the 1.5 million, is because we're thinking that's all we've got. But if we knew that also the cadence of cash flows in retirement include other things, such as Social Security, which is in itself a pension, right? Even though it, again, has risk of default, then the fact that you get the lump sum might mean that if you do the right math and figure it all out, based on your personal situation, that this works out like more money at the end in terminal value, because that, again, comes down to how much you spend. If you spend less, if you spend, you know, if your annual expenses are only $30,000, for example, and you've got 103 coming in, then I think you lose quite a lot here because you've got this forced income, right? And you're paying income tax on these pensions. I know there can be exceptions for state, whatever else. Leaving that aside, you're earning 103,000, but you don't need 103,000. What you would love to do is have nothing more than, you know, the exact amount, equilibrium coming in, 30,000 of income, 30,000 of expenses. That's it. This person here only has to withdraw 30,000. So, you know, the people are out there in the world seeking dividends and saying, this is going to improve my life and this is going to help me. They're missing that dividends are a full stream of income that you may not need. And if they exceed what your expenses are, they become inefficient. Because this person here allows his income to grow tax-free in retirement savings until RMD age, or, you know, it becomes somewhat, I wouldn't say tax-free because there's some sort of tax impact, but if it's inside a taxable account and he's only taking out long-term capital gains to the extent that he needs, then this is going to be compounding much more and invested much longer, whereas this person is going to have a tax hit on 103. So the tax person here, actually pays zero tax, and this person would pay tax, you know, in the situation. So that's the kind of the concept of saying, like, okay, there can be differences from a tax lens only, right? So if you're faced with this choice, we're thinking about person A, income-seeking person, person B, asset-seeking person, but knowing that in reality there's going to be a blend, but there's going to be decisions to say, do you want to lean heavily into assets or income, such as do you want a pension, or when do you take Social Security, or do you seek a dividend stock? These decisions will tilt you in a certain way. And what I think is interesting is how the external factors change things around. So we're going to look at like 2 or 3 other things quickly. this one here is the sequence of return risk. So what that is we know over time that we expect, hypothetically, 6% return from the investments we have. These days, people are saying it could be less than that, it could be 4% or less. The reality is, though, we all accept whatever the number is, that it's going to go up and down if we're using equity investments. We're going to have 1 year where you make 9%, 1 year where you make 2%, 1 year, so on and so forth, right? So it is the sequence that matters, right? Because the reason for that, and the reason why you have Vanguard's approach here, is that if these years here are bad years for investing, it will impact the final result. But the reality is this person will not be withdrawing from their account. So it doesn't matter as much, okay? If this person here gets to retirement and they're 7 years old and they have a $100,000 retirement account, so they have, and it's down 50%, and they need $50,000 to live on, well, they thought they could live for 2 years on that account, and now they can only live for 1 year, they withdraw it and there's nothing left. That's a sequence risk. Now, if that went the other way around, that first year of retirement, then they were saying, okay, well, the market is up 10% more than I thought it would be, then they could actually, again, use that sequence risk to say, okay, I'm going to take a little bit more off the table and preserve it for the future. There's one approach. You could also just leave it in there and then it would be more robust in general. But what I want to look at now is a couple of other things. So we said that quickly, if market declines and ups and everything else, a big factor for taking for income-seeking people, assuming that the amount of money we're talking about has been adjusted for risk, is going to be, the income seeker in a market decline is more insulated against problems because the risk has been transferred to the pension company. So I gave you my 1.5 million because that's effectively what you're doing when you're choosing a pension versus a lump sum. So you're buying a pension. I gave you my 1.5 million in exchange for 90,000 a year. With cost of living increases, blah, blah, blah. But you have to do that. You are now beholden to me, and unless you go bankrupt, I want my money. So I don't care that, I gave you the 1.5 million and now you invested it and it's down 50% because you still owe me my 90 forever. It doesn't change. So you transferred risk, and that's a massive value add for a pension. It can't be overstated. But then in other situations, there can be not just going down, but often it will go down and up, and reality is going to go down and up and down for forever, right? It's always going to move in different directions. So if it goes in a V shape, where it goes down and then up, we have this V shaped recovery from COVID, right? Everything down, everything up. So here, then we're saying that the asset seeker who is needing income in these early years, so say you retire at the age 60, if you need income in those years, then you unfortunately have to take from the account as it's losing value, which makes it harder when it starts going up again to recover to the value it was. So this is frustrating. So in a sense, asset seekers don't want this risk, okay? Now, on the other way around, if the market was going up, then you would be encouraged, if you were the asset person, to take, definitely what you need. It would be great. And the fact that you have all these assets means you benefit more from the up. Now, you get, say 2, 3, 4 years of this going up, and then it goes down again. Yeah, nobody wants it to go down, but the fact that it went up first and you were in first means that you either took money off the table, so you have extra reserves, or at the very least it starts from a stronger place before it goes down. So those are kind of a couple of things of thinking like macro, right? The outside world, the macroeconomic environment is changing the up and the down. But what I like as well is to think about this now. Think about micro, which is the person up, and that's a kind of a big focus of this. So think about Social Security, right? You can take Social Security early or late. There's different ranges. You can go from 62 to 70, and average now being 67, and then you can go in between. You could take 66, you could take 68, and so on and so forth, right? You've got this range. The more you leave it to 70, the more the payment will be worth. It will get a guaranteed increase for the rest of your life. The more you wait until 70 means that the less chance of you getting a full payment back if you die early will occur. So, if you claim Social Security early, if you knew you were going to die young, that would be the best thing. If you knew you were going to die older, or at a certain point you can do a break-even analysis, then late Social Security is great. And if you took 70 age Social Security and you lived to 120, then you made a very good choice because it's compounding that increase with you forever. But what's interesting we're looking through and say, well, you have a pension choice. You have, okay, I have this. I have a pension. I decided I'm going to take the pension or I'm going to take the lump sum. This changes your risk exposure on other things. So let's say you take a pension and say, well, I'm going to take the pension. Should I now take Social Security as well, or should I take Social Security later? Should I extend it for more, or should I take it later? And then again, the same question for the lump sum. So it's what it does is interesting to me is that if you create this lump sum situation, then you're relying on the market performance. You're saying, I'm going to keep the risk and not transfer the risk. I'm going to take this lump sum and I can beat the market because I'm a genius. Or, I'm not really a genius, but the offer that they made is so, just lacks generosity, and that the rates that they figured out for it are so poor that it's very, very easy to beat the market. I only need to beat 2% or 3% return over the years, and I can do that easily. And then obviously there's also that risk that if you die early, you've got the assets, which is better than having the income stream. What I like here then is that we found a risk. So the sequence risk we've identified increases if you need to rely on the assets. So in this situation here, when you've got this down then up, well, if you take a lump sum and then you take late Social Security, you've created a danger zone. You create a situation where you're in a whole world of trouble, because if the market doesn't do what it wants to do or what you need it to do, then you could really erode your assets, because you start off to say 1.7 million we were talking, and let's say you've got 10 years, so you've got to go from age 60 to age 70. You can do it. You say, okay, well, it's 170,000 a year without any gain. That's easy to do. I can withdraw that. But if it drops down 50%, suddenly you've only got 85,000, and you're like, oh, well, I need 100, and I won't make it unless the market comes back. So you're in a whole lot of trouble because of sequence of return risk. So this is where I think I'm trying to get to this point of saying, like, the glide path theory. Here's a basic version of it, right? Which is, we saw this chart here with the different colors, and it's a little bit like, I kind of understand it. I kind of dumbed it down a bit just to say, like, here's stocks and bonds and just that. So you can see lots of stocks, not very many stocks, and then bonds. So here we're saying, very simple, we land the plane. And it says more risk early, less risk later. But again, it kind of thinks that you're on a journey that's on a straight line, and you're not really, because in that situation we just talked about, in a situation we're saying, why don't we make a choice to take Social Security later on as a hedge against longevity, right? And why don't we take the lump sum to the pension now, so as a sort of hedge against losing it, not longevity, I guess, whatever the word for that is, premature death. So you've got like a kind of a barbell effect. So on the one hand, you've got a lump sum. If you die tomorrow, the kids get everything. On the other hand, if you have a lump sum and you're worried about living to 150 when you wish someone else was covering that risk at that point, well, you've enhanced your other streams of income with Social Security. So you've created this ravine of income where, for these 10 years, you've got very, very low forced income, which is what I like to be in. I like to be in a place where forced external income from dividends and everything else is not there. Okay, so what this then makes me think of is this idea of modified glide path. So glide path theory at age 65 would say you should be perhaps 30% stocks, 70% bonds. And the theory then is just that kind of, we're going down towards 20% stocks because we don't want any risk, right? And this is a good baseline theory. But let's think about it the other way. If you had a situation where you had excessive amounts of income, if you took the pension, for example, and you're 60 years old, you're just taking a pension, you might even also take, say for example, you take Social Security as well. So you take pension and Social Security at 62, and you've got income now of 140,000 a year. You're only spending 100 or something, after the taxes, you're all set, and you're probably cash flow positive. At this point, you don't need to be 30% stocks on your remaining assets. Because again, everybody has some assets, right? So let's say you've got 90,000 of this, of the pension, you've got like 100,000 on the side. You could totally take more risk. I mean, these are example numbers just to show the extremeness of it. But there would be no damage in this situation for someone to take as much as 70% risk at age 65 and beyond, at age 80, at 90. And in fact, you could say, why not, instead of going down with the risk, go up with risk? If someone's 105 years old and they have $1 million of assets, but they never use them because they've got so much income, then why take 30% risk on them or 20% risk on them? Because really we're saying you never need these. So really we're planning for this institutional endowment style strategy where we're passing on to the next generation. We're planning multi-generational investment allocations, right? And then this other thing here then is looking at this twofer thing, which is this flipping around the risk, right? Which is the late Social Security with a pension. So what we have here is we can say, why take excessive risk when we're in this danger zone? So we know what we have from age 60 to age 70 with very little income because we said no to the pension and we said no to the Social Security. We're going to delay everything. And these years, what we'll be doing is we're doing Roth conversions so you don't have to get RMDs. And then basically what happens here is like, well, why would I take any risk? I'm going to say, let's go very low, even lower than glide path theory perhaps, because it wouldn't say be this low at this point. And say, right, I'm going to take enough out of this 401k or IRA to first of all cover my expenses, and then I'll take another X to move me up to the next bracket I'm comfortable at. So if your expenses are actually 103 plus tax, maybe you pay a little bit of tax on that, maybe you can squeak out 150,000 from the 401k each year for these years, and you're just you're pushing 50 into the Roth or 30 into the Roth, and you're taking some for expenses and some for taxes. But why take risk? You can almost go all cash, right? Because really the only thing you want to not do here is damage the assets. You're not really seeking to grow them. You're seeking to prevent glide path, not glide path, the sequence of return risk. And glide path theory doesn't allow for that because it just puts you down on a flat plane. It doesn't realize that when you get to here and you're 75, you've got RMDs, you've got Social Security, you've got all these different things that are happening. Actually, take back on RMDs because they're not quite the same. But you've got Social Security and other sources of income into your, into your cash flow system. And at that point, once you've got other sources of income, then you simply don't need to rely on the account. The reason I took out RMDs from that is because RMDs are, while they do withdraw from retirement accounts, they do not create situations where you lose market exposure. And that's the danger of sequence of return risk, is if you have to withdraw from the market and then the market was at a low at that point and then it recovered, it feels like you took a lot more out for a lot less. Again, that situation where you had 100,000 in there and I was going to cover those 2 years of retirement in this one account you had, and you had to take a lot in 1 year and you've got nothing left to recover. It's the whole thing is gone. That's an extreme version of saying, oh, well, now because the market was down, I have no more money, because I had to withdraw I still need 50,000. Another piece on that is that, thinking about how much forced income you have is important, because you want to think from a tax lens, how much income you have. Do I need this income or is it detrimental? What can I do if I have a high income? Can I do Roth conversions? Can I do other things? Or, is it just too much income? I mean, there's definitely worse problems to have than too much income. But this is one where you can think about it and say, well, I'd rather this be low because I can always, if there's equilibrium, maybe this is, in your mind, this is a $3 million figure, whatever the number is, if there's equilibrium, I can top this up. So I'd rather have 3,000 instead of 103,000, and if I need some money, I'll take it out of this, as opposed to having nothing left in assets. So that's the equilibrium idea. And then once the risk is gone, so you're walking across a desert, right? You're 60 years of age, you go across, and you get to 70 years of age, and suddenly you've got income. And by delaying it, you've got lots of income. So let's say, you've got a good, strong earnings over your years, and your age 70 delayed Social Security is, with cost of living between now and then, it could be $70,000, maybe, $60,000, something like that range, right? Depending where you are. That might be enough. Because remember as well, people are always like, oh, well, I've got so much expenses, my expenses are like 50,000 or 60,000 a year. Well, also, people often put tax into that. So they say, okay, well, I need 60,000 because, I pay tax, and after that, I only get 30 or something like that. But they have to realize the less that you take out, the less tax you pay, to the point where you can pay almost no tax. So it becomes the first, the lower parts of income are more cash for your dollar, more in your pocket than in the tax pocket. So you might find that delaying Social Security would take up a lot of expenses in retirement. Even if it doesn't take all of them, it takes up a big chunk. And what happens then is you need less reliance on the assets. You can also, if there was a massive downturn in the market, you could stop taking out. You could be a little bit more frugal and say, okay, I don't have forced expenses. I don't have a mortgage anymore, things like that. So maybe I'll, don't have to worry about making these payments. Conversely, we could be situations where, you actually want to take a mortgage out because it gives you cash, like a reverse mortgage situation or, cash out sort of situation. I wouldn't say get rid of your home, but as a way to liquidate assets and stuff, you can get some, you can take a HELOC or something, get some cash out to avoid touching the other things in these investment accounts. But the point is that you don't need to lean on your assets once the Social Security comes in, and by delaying it, it's increased quite a lot. So that's kind of where we're at. I think the importance is not thinking about a glide path. First of all, understanding the glide path, and it makes sense, and it's great, and you should definitely, I encourage people to do this sort of investment strategy early on. I think it's a good one, with less risk perhaps than 90-10, maybe down here for my own preference. But let's not think about this being, okay, well, this is all snoozing now, because at the end of the day, if you reach 90 years of age and you've got $200,000 between pension, Social Security income, and you're only spending $100, and you've got $2 million in retirement accounts or more by then why are you investing that at 30 or 20% of stocks? Why are you not investing at a higher risk? Because you don't need that money, and really you should just tack those years on. That, if you're 90 and you're planning on 95 as being end of life, if you have a child who's 40, you should say, okay, add 40, take the 5 off that, you're actually 35, you should be down here somewhere. You should be thinking about that. So you should be, when your assets go here, and especially if you're taking his income, it will be like a dip, right? So instead of going down, 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 glide path, it will go down, 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 and it will dip up again, because it goes back up, because you've removed risk again. This is where you're at risk, especially if you take certain choices. If you take lump sums instead of pensions, and if you take, if you're delaying Social Security, this is where you want to protect, because this is where you would be at risk. Whereas once that hits, it's kind of like a milestone. You've got to 70 and you've protected your assets all the way there. Now you kind of hit a different phase. So phase 1 is like, let's be safe. Because if you start retirement age 60 with 1.7 million even in assets, as an example, then you'll easily make it to age 70, providing your income from other sources and your total expenses aren't that high or manageable. You can easily see the math on that. The only thing that could go wrong is if you take too much risk. Why take risk? You say, well, I want to get a good return for my investment. I don't want to just be a bum. I want everybody else to go out there and have less money than me, or the Joneses next door, they do really well. Forget all that. The only thing you can mess up between 60 and 70 in this sort of situation we're talking about is if you take on risk that you don't need and you end up somehow losing more than you need to, and you get to age 68 and go, oh wow, I'm in trouble. So let's say that happens, right? You're in age 68 and you're in trouble. Well, here's the other thing that is really cool about these sort of strategies and stuff, is you can say, okay, well, my asset allocation was a little bit too risky, but it's done now. The damage is done. But what do? I need, I need some money, but what do I do? So you could still take Social Security as an option here. Each juncture is a decision point. You get to age 68, you messed up a little bit, too much risk, didn't follow the plan. Then you get to 68 and go, okay, well, listen, if I were to take Social Security now, it would prevent me from needing to touch this account for a couple more years because I don't have that need. So as you go along, each step of the way, there is a sort of a chance to tweak it and adjust it and change it. And, there might be chances with legislation changes as well. You get to 72 age RMD now, which is a fairly recent change, possibly 75. These all change factors, and that gives you a bigger window to decide how long, when the money starts flowing in. And then we can really use these years, these 60, 65, 70, to both enjoy retirement and try to mitigate some of this RMD. You've got a lot of pre-tax assets out there, moving them into Roth as much as possible, but also only to the extent of the fact that you need other expenses. So the more expenses that you need, the less we can do of that.